Playing the 113 no limit game at Graton Resort and Casino. 7-handed, first to act limps, I raise it to 15 from the low jack with 6-8 of clubs, and I get 4 callers. We go to a flop of king 6 deuce with 2 diamonds and a heart. Checks to me, I see bet 25 to clear up some equity. 3 players drop out before under the gun calls. Heads up to a turn of a queen of clubs. Under the gun checks, and she's been playing pretty tight and straightforward during the session. If she has a good hand, she's been betting, and if she's drawing, she's just been check calling. The king being a diamond is somewhat significant since she can't have top pair plus a diamond draw. I fire 75 as a merge bet looking to potentially get value from draws and or get folds from a weak king. I don't expect the queen plus diamond draw to ever fold, and after she goes in the tank, she makes the call. We go to a river of a 7 of hearts, a good blank, and when she checks, I don't think I can just show down a pair of 6s often enough to take it down. So I fire 210 as a bluff. Obviously going to get auto folds from diamond draws, but looking to get her off a hand like a marginal king or queen. And after some deliberation, she decides to let it go. Next hand, there's a limp from under the gun. Low jack, who I perceive as a splashy player, raises to 15. I'm in the cutoff with ace jack offsuit and 3-bet it to 45 for value. Gets back to the low jack and he calls with 200 back. We go to a flop of jack 9-5 with 2 clubs and a heart. When he checks, with top pair against a shallow stack, I'm going to choose a larger bet since I don't want to give a cheap look to hands such as king queen. I fire 65 and he decides to fold. This next one is the hand of the session. There's a limp. It gets him in the hijack with ace-7 of diamonds, and I raise it to 15. Button calls, and big blind puts in a 3-bet to 60, playing another 400-ish back. In 1-3, I feel like big blind 3-bets are rarely light, which makes me want to fold, but I call hoping to build on my recent rush, and the button folds. We go heads up to a flop of king deuce with 2 diamonds. He checks, and it's a good flop with the nut flush draw. I fire 40. He makes the call. Turn comes a 5 of diamonds, so I get there. He checks once more. I fire $100. He makes the call. The river comes an 8 of clubs. He checks with 280 back, and I think this is where I make a betting error by choosing a polarized sizing of all in. I think the sizing only gets called by ace king, and he's folding hands such as queens and jacks. I would have liked a smaller bet to get calls from his entire range that arrives at this river. Long story short though, he snap calls, tables quads, and on the surface, it may look like a mini cooler, but I definitely butchered the river bet and got a little sticky pre in a game that tends to contain players that are dense towards value. And that's not going to be a winning recipe in 1-3. Shout out to the player that won this hand. I didn't get his name, but he was a vlog supporter, so at least a little silver lining there. I pick up jack 8 of diamonds from the low jack in this next one and raise it to 12. I get calls from the cutoff and big blind. 3 ways to a flop of king jack 8, so I flop bottom 2 pair. Both players have little left, so I bet enough to jam. Cutoff calls off for $29 and big blind folds. And we go to a run out that comes deuce deuce. Cutoff tables king queen off to take it down via the counterfeit. Last notable hand from this session, hijack and cutoff limp. I raise it to 20 from the button with ace 3 of clubs and only the cutoff calls. Heads up to a flop of jack 9-7 with 2 clubs, so I flop the nut flush draw. When he checks, I decide to check back. Turn comes a 6 of clubs, so I get there. He checks, I fire 30. He calls. River comes a 4 of spades. He checks, I go big and bet 100, and he lets it go. Again, just like the hand where I ran into quads, can debate sizing on the river. Nevertheless, nice to take this one down. Alright, that wraps it up for the hands from Graton. Got stuck in the 1-3 game for about $500. Did end up playing 2-5, and the good news is that I booked a couple $100 win in that one. Bad news is that I don't have any interesting hands to share. It was just a very boring session that I was able to grind out a bit of profit from. And the overall bad news is that I ended up booking a net loss for that session at Graton of around $250. And it's been a rough few weeks of poker, currently in the midst of a $3,000 to $4,000 downswing. And I did play 5-10, tried to vlog it here at Lucky Chances. First time they spread that game in maybe like 2 years. And it was the most anticlimactic 5-10 session I can remember playing. I bought in for $2,500 and out for $2,250. Nothing interesting happened, but did end up booking another loss in that one too. So all of that has added up into this downswing that I'm in. But I am back at Lucky Chances today, going to hop in 3-5, try to run it up. Alright, first hand got a middle position limp. I raise it to 25 from the low jack with pocket 10s, and I get 3 callers, the hijack, small blind, and middle position. Multi-way to a flop of king 10-7 with 2 clubs and a spade, so I flop middle set, checks to me. I fire 60 looking to get action, of course, but unfortunately, everyone folds. Good welcome to the table, though. Next hand, I raise it to 20 from the low jack with pocket kings. 4 callers this time, and we go heavily multi-way to a flop of 9-9-5. Checks to me. I c-bet 60 just like the previous hand, and again, I face no resistance from the other players. Next hand, middle position limps. Low jack raises to 25. I'm in the small blind with ace jack offsuit, and flatting from this position can present difficult challenges, particularly in tough lineups, but this table is playing pretty straightforward, so I just flat to see what develops. Big blind and middle position call as well. Multi-way to a flop of queen 7-7 with 2 hearts and a club. Checks to the initial raiser and the low jack who bets 80. Although I have the ace of hearts, it's tough to peel and or consider making a play here since I've got 2 players left to act behind me. And the initial raiser who bet this flop is too shallow with just 200 back. I fold, and the other 2 players follow suit. Low jack takes this one down and shows a queen of clubs. The next 3 hands are 4-handed. First one, straddle pot, small blind calls. I'm in the big blind with pocket 8s and raise it to 45. Only the straddler calls. Heads up to a flop of ace queen 9. Good flop for the range, and I should c-bet this quite often, but with my exact hand, I check, he checks back. Turn comes a 9 of spades, checks through once more. River is a 6 of diamonds, checks again. I table, and it's good enough showdown value to take this one down. This next one, cutoff raises to 20, button calls. I'm in the small blind with deuce 3 of diamonds and get frisky and 3-bet it to 105. Big blind, a sticky reg, is a true non-believer, 4-bets it to 490. That's way too much to continue. I let it go. I raise to 20 from the cutoff in this next one with ace 10 offsuit. Button, who is the same player from the last hand, calls, and the small blind calls as well. 3 ways to a flop of 10-8-7 with 2 clubs and a spade. Small blind checks. Although it's a connected board, top pair fares to be the best hand pretty often in single raise pots, particularly 4-handed. I check with the intention to check raise the button should he bet, but he checks back. Turn comes a deuce of clubs, so the board gets better. If I just had the naked ace of clubs, I may try again for the check raise, but with top pair to go with it, I try to go for some value after small blind checks. I bet 30 and only the button calls. River comes, a 5 of clubs, so I get there. I fire 70, hoping to get called, and after some deliberation, button does call. The table then fills back up, but definitely enjoyed some short-handed play since it doesn't happen too often in live games. In this next one, I raise it to 20 from the hijack with ace-queen of spades. Cutoff, who's a good player, 3-bets to 75. Button cold calls, and this one's close between a 4-bet or call. The problem with 4-betting is that I'd be somewhat turning my hand into a bluff, which isn't ideal, particularly since I am suited, so I just make the call. We go 3 ways to a flop of king jack 7, so I flop the nut shot with backdoor spades. Checks to the 3-better who fires 150, big blind calls, and I decide to take one off as well. Turn comes the 5 of clubs, so nothing changes. Action checks through this time. River comes a 4 of hearts, and big blind fires a bit over $400. I go in the tank for a while as I just don't know how many king plus hands that big blind is going to have as played. A hand that makes good sense is 9-10 suited, which is a bricked double gutter that has no showdown, so he has to bet as a bluff. The problem with calling is that I still have cutoff left behind to act, even though his check back on the turn should indicate that he doesn't have too much. I ultimately decide to fold, and cutoff quickly folds as well. Straddle pot 7-handed in this next one. I raise it to 35 from the low jack with 8-9 of hearts, and I get calls from the hijack and straddler. Through ace to a flop of queen 10-3. Checks to me, and I have a hand that may be worth tripling off here, so I start off with a c-bet of 50. Both players call. Turn comes an ace of diamonds, so a good card to continue the story. However, Straddler chooses to bet 220, and that ends any plans to try and steal this one. Next hand, there's a raise to 20. Two callers before it gets to me on the button with 6-7 of spades. I call, and small blind calls. 5 ways to a flop of 9-5 deuce rainbow, so I flop a gutter with backdoor spades. Checks to me, and it should be a flop that I can begin bluffing on, but I choose the conservative route and check it back. The turn comes a 9 of spades, so I pick up the combo draw on a paired board. Small blind fires 50, hijack calls, I decide to make the call, and we go 3 ways to a river of a king of spades. So I get there, small blind continues firing, 140, hijack calls, and that amount is good enough for me, so I call. Small blind tables his hand, which is 10-4 of spades for the higher flush to take it down. So I play a marginal hand passively, and I get punished for it. Final hand to run through. I pick up aces in the hijack and I raise it to 20. Both blinds call. We go to a flop of jack 3 deuce rainbow. Small blind checks. Big blind bets 25. I raise it to 80. Small blind folds, and big blind now jams for 474. He could have bottom set or middle set, but just not in the mood to fold, so I make the call. And we go to a run out, which comes a 6 and a 7. Big blind tables 4-5 of diamonds for the straight to take it down. So find some run bad to end the session. All right, that's gonna wrap it up for this one. Started the session at 10 o'clock. It's now 5 in the morning. It's technically 4 in the morning, but it's the first day of daylight saving, so lose an hour, and that's not the only thing I lost. Got in the game for 1,800, out for 1130, so book yet another loss, this time $670, and this one stings. And not much else to say on this one. It looks like the vlog run good doesn't appear to be a thing for me currently, and just gonna let this one burn as long as it needs to, and then get back after it.